Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. The world of Harry Potter is captivating, inspiring, and stirs the imagination. But even in this magical universe, some things feel a little too convenient. Fortunate coincidences, forgotten magical items, decisions that push the plot forward, yet raise a skeptical eyebrow. Naturally, every fantasy relies on narrative devices, but sometimes events unfold so smoothly you can't help but ask, was the author's hand a little too visible? Today, we'll explore 6 such moments, those magical coincidences without which the story of Harry Potter might have gone in a completely different direction. Enjoy the video. Number 1. Harry and Sirius. Forget the mirrors. One of the most heartbreaking scenes in the entire saga is Sirius Black's death. But what if it could have been avoided with a single glance into a mirror? In the 5th book, Sirius gives Harry a magical mirror, one half of a pair that allows them to communicate instantly. No owls, no fireplaces, no risk. But when it matters most, Harry forgets it exists. Worse still, Sirius himself doesn't think to use it either. As a result, Harry, misled by Voldemort's false visions, rushes to the Department of Mysteries. The Order follows. A battle begins, ending in tragedy. Such forgetfulness from two people deeply connected and fighting on the front lines of a magical war seems a little too out of character, especially when lives are on the line. Number 2. Severus Snape overhears Trelawney's prophecy. The entire Harry Potter story begins with a prophecy. Words spoken by Trelawney at the Hogshead Inn that shaped the fates of Harry, Voldemort, the Potters, and Snape himself, and all of it happens by chance? Snape, still serving Voldemort at the time, just happens to be near the room at the exact moment Trelawney makes the only true prophecy of her life. He hears part of it, and everything begins. But why was Snape even there? Why eavesdropping on the job interview of a low-profile divination teacher in a shabby tavern that particular evening? Had he been 5 minutes late, the prophecy would have gone unheard. Voldemort wouldn't have targeted Harry. The Potters might have lived. So much depends on one lucky moment or someone's strange intuition. Number 3. All the time-turners get destroyed in the Department of Mysteries. In Prisoner of Azkaban, we learn that wizards can travel through time. Hermione even wears a time-turner around her neck like a schedule key. The artifact allows people to influence events, save lives, even rewrite history. So why is it never used again? The answer comes in Order of the Phoenix. During the battle in the Department of Mysteries, all the time-turners are accidentally destroyed, and just like that, problem solved. Coincidence? Or a very convenient one? It's as if the creators of the world said, okay, no more time travel, too messy. Also, are we really supposed to believe the Ministry kept all time-turners in a single room with no backup and no added protections? It's a logical move for the plot, but absurd from a magical security standpoint. Number 4. Sirius spots Peter Pettigrew in a newspaper. Sirius Black escapes Azkaban. Hey, it's a legendary moment that shakes the entire wizarding world. But what makes him do it? A newspaper. In it, a photo of the Weasley family's vacation to Egypt. And in that photo, a rat. Ron's beloved pet, Scabbers. Sirius instantly recognizes him as Peter Pettigrew, and the chase begins. But what an incredible chain of events. The Weasleys win a lottery, go to Egypt, their photo makes the front page, and Cornelius Fudge just so happens to visit Sirius in prison that very day, with that specific issue in hand. If that's not magic-level coincidence, what is? Number 5. No students die in Chamber of Secrets. The 2nd book is one of the darkest in tone, mysterious attacks, fear in the hallways, whispers of Slytherin's air, and a terrifying creature slithering through the school. And yet, no casualties. The basilisk, an ancient serpent capable of killing with a glance, somehow only petrifies its victims. One saw it through a camera lens, another through water. One was a ghost, another spotted it in a mirror. Each victim gets bizarrely lucky. Hermione even manages to solve the mystery and leave a helpful clue for Harry, and Ginny, under the diary's control all year, escapes without emotional or social fallout. Of course, this is a children's story, and Rowling didn't want to cross certain lines, but even within magical logic, this much luck feels suspicious. Number 6. Choosing Peter Pettigrew as secret keeper. When Voldemort began hunting the Potters, they used the Fidelius charm for protection, but the charm required a secret keeper. Sirius Black, James's best friend, decides he's too obvious a target and passes the role to Pettigrew, and Pettigrew betrays them, bringing Voldemort straight to their doorstep and becoming the symbol of cowardice and treachery. But why was he chosen at all? Why not someone more trustworthy, like Dumbledore? In the 7th book, we learn a person can even be their own secret keeper. So why didn't Lily and James, knowing there was a traitor in the Order, just keep the secret between themselves? There's no answer, just another convenience for the story. Without Pettigrew, there'd be no drama, but the price of that drama is character logic and believability. Number 7, Voldemort's wand refuses to obey him in the final duel. Voldemort raised the Elder Wand and cast the killing curse. But it failed. Not because of weak magic, but because the wand refused him. It had already chosen another master, and that master was Harry. Not because he stole it, not because he killed for it, but because he had disarmed Draco Malfoy weeks earlier in Malfoy Manor. The wand chooses the wizard, Ollivander once said. But in this case, the wand chose through a chain of invisible events. Draco had disarmed Dumbledore. Harry had disarmed Draco. Voldemort took the wand from Dumbledore's tomb, never knowing its loyalty had shifted twice without a spell being cast. It was all unseen, all quiet. And in the end, this subtle magic changed everything. One duel, one wand flick in a dungeon, and the fate of the wizarding world tilted. A brilliant twist for a story, but a strangely delicate mechanism for the most powerful wand in existence, too delicate perhaps for such a brutal war. Number 8, Harry uses Sectum Sempra at just the right time. Malfoy raised his wand, his face twisted with rage. Cruci. But before he could finish, Harry shouted a word he barely understood. Sectum Sempra. The spell hit like a blade. Blood exploded across the bathroom. Draco collapsed, screaming, and Harry, stunned by what he'd done, stared at the scene in horror. He had no idea what the spell did. He had never used it before, and yet, in the one moment he truly needed to stop an attack, it turned out to be a weapon. The spell came from the Half-Blood Prince's old textbook, scrawled in the margins with casual cruelty. Harry had seen it there, a warning beside it. For enemies. Still, he had dozens of other options, jinxes, disarming charms, stunners. But he picked that one. And it just so happened to be exactly what could save him from the Cruciatus curse. Not defensive, not stunning, lethal. The timing felt suspiciously precise. A mystery spell chosen at random delivered a perfect counterattack. Too perfect to be coincidence. Number 9, Neville randomly finds the perfect underwater solution. Time was running out. The second task was near, and Harry still had no idea how to breathe underwater. He searched books, asked for help. Hermione, the brightest witch in Hogwarts, found nothing useful. And then Neville Longbottom, the shy boy who once melted his cauldron, casually mentions gillyweed. It's really useful for underwater, he says, almost like a joke. But it's exactly what Harry needs, the perfect solution, dropped in his lap at the last minute. Neville had never been shown as a confident expert in herbology. Not yet. And yet he knew the exact magical plant, its effects, and how it could be used. Even Professor Moody's, or rather Barty Crouch Jr., in disguise, subtly encouraged the moment, nudging Neville to help. But for readers, the timing feels too precise, too convenient. A magical fix handed over by an unlikely source just before it becomes critical. It worked. It saved Harry, but it didn't feel earned. Number 10. The flying Ford Anglia shows up in the forest at the perfect moment. They ran until there was nowhere left to run. The spiders closed in, hundreds of them, hissing, clicking, crawling over each other. Aragog's children had no interest in stories or survival. They wanted meat. Ron screamed. Harry grabbed a fangless wand. It should have ended there, in that black pit of the forbidden forest. But then came the roar of an engine. The old Ford Anglia crashed through the underbrush like a knight from some metal fairy tale. "It's our car!" Ron shouted as the blue vehicle ploughed through spiders, doors swinging open like arms. They jumped in, wheels spun, the forest blurred. It didn't stop until they were safe. That car had been gone since the beginning of the term. Lost, wild, damaged. But not only had it survived in the woods, it returned at the precise second they needed saving. Why now? Why not days earlier, or never at all? The book offers no answer. J.K. Rowling writes, "It had developed a taste for the wild, but a taste isn't timing. The car became a character, yes, but also a miracle. Its arrival, while thrilling, asks the reader to believe that a rogue automobile had a sense of dramatic rescue, not magic, not logic, just storytelling necessity arriving in a cloud of mud and diesel." Number 11. The trio stumbles upon Xenophilius Lovegood just in time. They were wandering without direction, hunted, cold, tired. The locket weighed heavy on Harry's chest, poisoning his thoughts. Ron had left. The forest offered no answers. And then a sudden change. Hermione remembered Xenophilius Lovegood. "Luna's father," she said. "He wore that strange symbol at the wedding." It was a desperate lead, but they followed it. And somehow, in the chaos of war, they found the one man who could explain the Deathly Hallows. It was too perfect. Xenophilius didn't just recognize the symbol. He had an entire room filled with books, relics, and dusty theories. He told them the tale of the three brothers, explained the invisibility cloak, the elder wand, the resurrection stone. "Together they make one master of death," he said. Harry sat silent, stunned. It was the first time anyone had connected the pieces, but how did they stumble on him now, at the exact moment when they needed that truth most? The trio had no map, no plan, just a memory of a symbol glimpsed at a wedding. And yet it led them to the doorstep of the one wizard in Britain obsessed with Hallows. It didn't feel earned, it felt designed. The scene was brilliant, eerie, rich with tension, and shadowed by betrayal. But its convenience echoed too loudly. The road to understanding immortality should have been harder. Instead, the answers were waiting in a crooked tower, lit by candlelight, just when Harry was ready to hear them. Number 12. Nagini doesn't attack Harry and Hermione immediately. Snow fell quietly over Godric's Hollow as Harry and Hermione stepped into the house of Bathilda Bagshot. The air was thick with silence. Dust covered the walls, but Harry followed her, the shriveled, silent woman, up the stairs, drawn by something strange, something familiar. "She wants me to go alone," he whispered to Hermione, and she let him. But the woman upstairs was not Bathilda. She was Nagini, Voldemort's snake, wrapped in a human disguise, rotting from the inside out. Nagini had every chance to kill Harry the moment he crossed the threshold. He was vulnerable, wand half lowered, mind clouded with grief and awe. Hermione was just downstairs. A single strike could have ended it. But instead, Nagini waited. She lured him up the stairs, watched him come closer, step by step. Only when Harry looked into the mirror and saw no reflection did the snake reveal herself. The trap snapped too late. The snake's skin burst open and the great long python rose up, the book says. But by then Harry had already screamed. Hermione burst in, spells flying. The room exploded in flashes, books and plaster shattered as Nagini lunged, but it was chaos now, too late for a clean kill. They escaped, apparating into the night. If Nagini had attacked from the start, Harry wouldn't have had a chance. The fact that she didn't makes no sense for a creature that serves Voldemort, who ordered Harry's death 100 times over. A predator waits for prey to come close, but only when silence ensures success. This was not hunting, this was theatre. The scene worked. It gave readers a moment of horror, a taste of death. It showed the danger was growing, closer than ever. But in the logic of the magical world, it falls apart. Why would a deadly, intelligent snake waste time with dramatics? Why give Harry a moment to react? The answer lies not in Nagini's instincts, but in the needs of the story. She attacked not when she should have, but when the timing would make the scene unforgettable. Number 13. Voldemort entrusts Horcruxes to unreliable places and people. Voldemort feared death more than anything. He split his soul into 7 fragments to escape it. But when it came to hiding those Horcruxes, he made decisions that feel careless, even foolish. The diadem of Rowena Ravenclaw will be as one of his most valuable soul anchors was hidden in the Room of Requirement, a space that literally reveals itself to anyone who needs it. A student could have stumbled across it by accident, and yet Voldemort thought this place well hidden, as he told his followers, never realizing that Hogwarts had a life of its own. Then there was the cup of Helga Hufflepuff, entrusted to Bellatrix Lestrange. She was loyal, yes, but erratic, cruel, and unbalanced. Worse, Voldemort stored it in her vault at Gringotts, a bank that, while well guarded, had already been broken into in the very first book. Impossible to rob, people said. And yet Harry, Ron, and Hermione broke in and escaped on a dragon. That's not strategy, that's plot armor. The locket, another Horcrux, was hidden in a sea cave protected only by a basin of poison and some inferi. Dumbledore, old and half-dead, still managed to retrieve it with Harry. Voldemort didn't use blood magic or unbreakable enchantments, just a simple riddle and a boat. The boy who lived didn't need ancient magic to break through, just guts and a bit of luck. "Your blood is worth more than mine," Dumbledore had said before they entered. That line alone shows how Voldemort underestimated the people who would come after him. He thought fear was enough, that his name alone would keep people from trying. He didn't imagine love or loyalty or desperation. Voldemort believed in control, not chaos, but Horcrux after Horcrux fell, and with each one, Harry stepped closer to the end. The Dark Lord created the path to his own destruction, and he paved it with arrogance. Number 14, Fawkes the Phoenix appears exactly when needed. Harry stood alone in the eerie silence of the Chamber of Secrets, the wet stone beneath his feet slick with the moisture of centuries. Before him, the towering statue of Salazar Slytherin loomed like a forgotten god, watching coldly as the basilisk slithered from its mouth. At that moment, Harry was utterly alone. No teachers, no friends, no allies. Tom Riddle, the preserved teenage memory of Lord Voldemort, watched with a cruel smirk as the serpent obeyed his commands. Everything in that scene painted the picture of a tragic end. Harry was 12. He had no wand capable of defeating such a beast. He had no plan, no training, and worst of all, no backup. Then, suddenly and inexplicably, there was a flash of light, a song, and a bird. Fawkes the Phoenix descended like a divine emissary from some forgotten legend. Not only did the bird fly into the heart of this ancient and hidden place deep beneath Hogwarts, but he brought with him the Sorting Hat. From that hat, Harry would later draw the sword of Godric Gryffindor, a weapon capable of slaying the monster. The symbolism alone was staggering, but the mechanics of the moment raised more questions than answers. Fawkes, Dumbledore's loyal phoenix, had somehow known that Harry needed help, not in a general sense, but with precise, surgical accuracy. The bird flew to a place that almost no one alive even knew existed. He brought exactly what was needed at exactly the right time. It is said in the book that phoenixes are very faithful pets, and that they will come to their master's aid in times of need. Dumbledore later explains to Harry, "You must have shown me real loyalty down in the chamber. Nothing but that could have called Fawkes to you." This, of course, offers a surface-level explanation. Loyalty summoned Fawkes, but that doesn't account for the layers of convenient timing and magical precision. Fawkes did not just appear. He appeared in the right place with the right tools, with the right powers, just as Harry was on the brink of death. It is a storytelling moment that functions almost like divine intervention. In classical literature, this would be described as deus ex machina, a god from the machine, when an impossible problem is suddenly solved by an unexpected power. The moment Fawkes enters the Chamber of Secrets, the narrative does not so much progress as it resets. The boy who was seconds away from death now stands beside a mythic creature armed with a legendary sword and protected by healing tears. Not only does this remove the consequences of Harry's desperate situation, it replaces them with tools that make him nearly invincible in the battle that follows. The sword of Gryffindor, too, arrives in a mystifying way. It materializes from the Sorting Hat only after Harry places it on his head during the chaos of battle. There is no prior explanation that such a weapon even exists within the hat, yet Dumbledore later says only a true Gryffindor could have pulled that out of the hat, but even this feels suspiciously convenient. Why does the hat contain the sword? Why is it accessible only under mortal threat? And why had no one ever mentioned this before? It seems less like a clever twist and more like a writer's lifeline thrown to the protagonist to save him from an unwinnable fate. The basilisk was no ordinary foe. Its gaze was instant death. Its fangs were venomous beyond any natural healing. Fawkes handled both problems without fanfare. The phoenix attacked the eyes of the serpent, blinding it and removing its greatest weapon. Then, when Harry is bitten and facing certain death, Fawkes weeps on the wound and heals him. Rowling writes, "The wound vanished. Harry's arm was smooth and unmarked, as though the fang had never been there." The tears of a phoenix are a powerful, magical substance, we are told. But again, the application here is astonishingly surgical. Fawkes is not just present. He is prepared for every need, fulfilling every narrative requirement as it arises. This series of interventions robs the moment of its stakes. Before Fawkes's arrival, Harry is alone against an ancient evil. After Fawkes, he is nearly unstoppable. The shift is so abrupt that the entire tone of the scene changes. What was once a horror-filled descent into death becomes a mythic triumph equipped with all the trappings of a hero's victory: a magical sword, a divine companion, a healed wound, and a vanquished enemy. The discomfort arises not because these elements are undeserved, but because they are too perfectly timed, too exact in their support. Tom Riddle himself is caught off guard by the Phoenix's appearance. His calculated plan is thrown into disarray not by Harry's cleverness, but by something he could never have predicted. "That's a phoenix! That's a phoenix!" Riddle cries with a mixture of confusion and disgust. He does not understand why the bird has arrived or what it represents, but the reader is equally baffled. The explanation given, loyalty, feels more symbolic than practical. How does loyalty function as a GPS beacon to guide a bird to the deepest recesses of the castle? How does that same loyalty ensure the bird carries specific tools? The mechanics are never addressed. This isn't the only time the narrative bends to favor Harry, but it is perhaps the most overt. The Chamber of Secrets was designed as a test. It was meant to be a place of secrets, isolation, and ancient danger. That the solution to this test arrives from the sky in a burst of magical music feels like a contradiction. It undermines the danger and reframes the event as a preordained success. It is no longer Harry versus evil. It is Harry plus Fawkes plus sword plus Phoenix tears versus evil. The odds are no longer daunting. They are reversed entirely. Number 15, Harry resurrects after Avada Kedavra. Harry Potter stood alone in the Forbidden Forest, his heart pounding in his chest as he faced Lord Voldemort for what he believed would be the final time. Surrounded by Death Eaters, lit only by flickering wandlight and moon glow, Harry did not raise his wand. He offered no resistance. Voldemort raised his, shouted, "Avada Kedavra!" and the green light hit Harry square in the chest. He crumpled. Silence fell. The boy who lived, the child of prophecy, was dead. Or so everyone thought. What followed next was perhaps the most controversial moment in the entire saga, Harry's miraculous return. And while J.K. Rowling provides a patchwork of magical logic to justify his survival, many readers have long questioned whether this resurrection served the narrative's emotional truth or simply offered a conveniently timed way out. In Deathly Hallows, Rowling tries to anchor Harry's survival in three explanations. The first is the presence of Voldemort's own soul fragment within Harry. When Voldemort casts the killing curse, it destroys that piece of his own soul rather than Harry's. The second explanation involves the lingering protective enchantment of Lily Potter's sacrifice, because Voldemort used Harry's blood to regain his body in Goblet of Fire. He inadvertently allowed that protection to live on in himself, tethering Harry to life. The third piece of the puzzle lies in Harry's supposed status as Master of Death, the one who possesses all three Deathly Hallows. While all these elements are introduced earlier in the series, their convergence at this precise moment feels remarkably convenient. A boy is hit with a spell that has killed countless others, including Cedric Diggory just a few pages earlier, but he survives because of a web of magical exceptions that, by chance, all apply to him. This triumvirate of justifications leads to a narrative that leans dangerously close to Deus Ex Machina. Voldemort, a character obsessed with understanding death and mastering immortality, somehow fails to realize the implications of using the very curse that didn't work on Harry the first time. Worse, he does so again without considering the unique magical factors at play. How could a wizard so paranoid, so invested in magical knowledge, fail to grasp that Harry might not be a typical target? One might argue that arrogance blinded him, and certainly Voldemort has shown an unwillingness to accept love-based magic. But this is the final confrontation, the climax of 7 books. For Voldemort to make the same mistake twice, especially when the first mistake nearly cost him everything, feels less like poetic justice and more like authorial intervention. Rowling certainly builds the lore to make the moment technically plausible, but that's not the same as emotionally earned. He took my blood, Harry reflects in Deathly Hallows. Believing it would strengthen him, he took into his body a tiny bit of the enchantment his mother laid upon him, and when he did, he tethered me to life while he lives. It's a poetic line, certainly, but also one that underlines the miraculous coincidence of events. Voldemort's choice to use Harry's blood, intended to circumvent the protection, ironically sustains it. This twist aligns with the series' themes of love and sacrifice. But it also raises the uncomfortable implication that Harry's continued existence depended on his enemy making a very specific mistake. There is also the issue of the Deathly Hallows themselves, the Elder Wand, the Resurrection Stone, and the Invisibility Cloak. Harry possesses all three, which makes him symbolically the Master of Death. Yet Rowling makes it clear that Harry never fully uses them in that capacity. He drops the Resurrection Stone in the forest. The Elder Wand he intends to return to Dumbledore's tomb. The cloak is the only hallow he keeps. So how does being Master of Death grant him survival? Is it a symbolic victory over death or a literal immunity? The narrative never offers a satisfying answer. The implication is that by embracing death, Harry transcends it. But that is philosophy, not mechanics. In the world of spells, curses, and magical laws, ambiguity at such a crucial moment feels more like a narrative shortcut than a profound truth. One cannot ignore the dramatic symmetry Rowling seeks in having Harry willingly walk to his death, only to return. It mirrors Christ-like imagery, the self-sacrifice, the temporary death, the resurrection, But while these archetypes have power, they also risk reducing the stakes. When Harry returns from the King's Cross limbo, he is fundamentally unchanged. There is no physical cost, no magical price to pay. He simply comes back, alive and able to continue fighting. It is a heroic act, yes, but one that lacks consequence. Resurrection without cost undermines the weight of sacrifice. In a story that asks readers to mourn the deaths of Fred Weasley, Lupin, Tonks, and countless others, the resurrection of Harry without repercussion sends a confusing message about who gets to survive and why. In the same forest where Harry's body lies motionless, Voldemort commands Narcissa Malfoy to check whether the boy is truly dead. She finds him breathing, alive, but she lies to her master, knowing that Harry is alive because she wants to return to her son. This moment is deeply human, arguably more powerful than any spell, and it adds yet another layer of coincidence to the situation. Had Voldemort checked Harry himself, had he been less arrogant or more thorough, the story could have ended right there. But everything falls into place for Harry. The curse kills only the soul fragment. The blood tether keeps him alive. Narcissa lies to Voldemort, and the Deathly Hallows provide symbolic legitimacy. One stroke of luck might be forgivable, but four. Number 16, Hermione's bottomless bag has everything they need. Of all the marvels scattered across the wizarding world, few are as suspiciously convenient as Hermione Granger's bottomless bag in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. The story places our trio, Harry, Ron, and Hermione, in the most desperate and unpredictable of circumstances, fugitives from a magical regime, hunted like criminals, with no sanctuary, no allies, and no fixed plan, and yet at every turn the very thing they need is pulled from the depths of Hermione's enchanted handbag, as though the plot had reached down and handed them salvation through its very fingertips. The charm she used, an extension charm, is not uncommon among skilled witches and wizards, yet the comprehensiveness and accuracy of Hermione's magical packing raise a skeptical eyebrow. It becomes not merely a tool of survival, but a narrative safety net, and one that almost never fails. Inside the tiny beaded handbag, small enough to pass undetected by Death Eaters and passers-by alike, Hermione managed to fit a full-sized, self-pitching tent stocked with sleeping bags and bedding. When the trio sets up camp in a variety of remote and rugged locations, from the Forest of Dean to the shores of a frozen lake, it is always the same miraculous shelter that saves them from frostbite and exposure. This tent is the very same used during the Quidditch World Cup in the Goblet of Fire, and its reappearance borders on implausible prescience. That Hermione brought this exact magical tent instead of a simpler shelter, or none at all, suggests either extraordinary foresight or a narrative convenience dressed in the guise of cleverness. Not only does the bag contain shelter, it produces spare clothes, food, healing potions, and books at pivotal moments. After Ron's splinching during the side-along apparition from the Ministry, Hermione doesn't panic or fumble. Instead, she pulls out Dittany, a rare and powerful healing potion, and applies it to the wound without hesitation. Hermione was already rummaging in her beaded bag. They had always kept essence of Dittany for emergencies. Emergencies indeed, but how did she know this would be the kind of emergency they would face? Of all possible injuries, broken bones, cursed wounds, hexes, it is precisely the one treated by Dittany that occurs. One cannot help but feel the author's hand here, guiding the injury toward the exact cure. It isn't just healing supplies and tents. When they need a way to guard their location, Hermione retrieves the Tales of Beedle the Bard, a book that proves critical in deciphering the mystery of the Deathly Hallows. The book is not merely a comfort or curiosity. It contains the tale of the three brothers, a foundational legend to the very plot of the final installment. How did Hermione decide this particular fairy tale collection was worth carrying during a life-or-death escape? There is no indication that Dumbledore hinted at its deeper meaning, only that he left it to her. In his will, The narrative justification is thin, yet the payoff is enormous. Even more staggering is the presence of Phineas Nigellus Black's portrait within the bag. This enchanted painting offers not only advice but vital intelligence. Through Phineas, they learn that Voldemort has discovered the location of the next Horcrux. The portrait could have remained back at Grimmauld Place or been destroyed during one of their many escapes. But no, Hermione had wisely preserved it in her bottomless purse, as if she foresaw that a talking picture would someday deliver strategic information behind enemy lines. It is the ultimate deus ex machina hidden in silk. The bag also contains books on magical theory, spellwork, and advanced enchantments. Though Hermione's love of reading is well established, the sheer number of specific texts she packed borders on impossible. When she needs to protect their campsite, she consults secrets of the darkest art. When they need to break into Gringotts, she already has background on the thief's downfall. It's as if the bag contains the precise bibliography required for each subsequent obstacle. These books aren't described in vague terms. They are named, quoted, and used. Hermione doesn't simply remember facts. She physically consults sources she brought along for a journey she couldn't possibly have planned. Another miraculous moment arrives during their escape from the Ministry. After Polyjuice mishaps and narrow escapes, they emerge to discover they need immediate relocation. Hermione doesn't hesitate. She retrieves the tent, casts protective enchantments, and sets up a temporary sanctuary within minutes. Everything from water purification to magical concealment is executed with tools from the bag. Even the famous portrait is consulted for next steps. It is as though Hermione had planned an elaborate backpacking trip through post-apocalyptic Britain with a precise itinerary of magical catastrophes. Then there is the inclusion of Polyjuice Potion, brewed in advance and stored carefully. This is not a simple potion. It takes a full month to make, and Hermione had it ready. Though the need to infiltrate the Ministry was unknown until weeks after they became fugitives, the potion is waiting in her bag. How could she know they'd impersonate specific Ministry workers? The preparation required not just potion making, but the theft of hairs or DNA from the right people. Yet somehow they have exactly what they need to turn into Mafalda Hopkirk, Albert Runcorn, and Reg Catamol. The bag doesn't merely preserve them, it upgrades them. Its contents allow Harry to cast the Patronus charm with greater effectiveness after reading advanced defensive magical theory. Ron can destroy a Horcrux with Gryffindor's sword, transported later, but foreshadowed in a way that feels as conveniently timed as any object in the bag. Every major magical need is anticipated. They lack nothing but emotional peace. Food becomes a recurring struggle, yet even that is tempered by the presence of Muggle cooking supplies, tea, and matches. The trio's minor sufferings are carefully curated. They endure hardship, yes, but always the right kind of hardship, never one that endangers the narrative timeline. The bag offers reprieve at carefully controlled intervals, preserving their strength for emotional and moral crises rather than logistical ones. Hermione's forethought is never questioned in universe. Harry and Ron accept that she has everything because she is Hermione. The story leans on her identity as a perfectionist to justify the magical inventory she carries, but even a perfectionist cannot guess what pages of magical lore she'll need 3 months into an unplanned exile, and yet Hermione does, or rather the plot ensures she does. Number 17. The full body bind curse always works without fail. There was something oddly perfect about the way Petrificus Totalis operated in the hands of young witches and wizards throughout the Harry Potter saga. Time and again, the spell was invoked under pressure, in moments of panic or danger, and each time it seemed to deliver exactly the result that was needed, exactly when it was needed. The incantation, designed to paralyze the target completely, turned bodies into rigid, motionless statues, helpless and neutralized. But perhaps what made this spell so alluring to readers and so problematic for deeper analysis was the near-perfect consistency of its success. Within the enchanted walls of Hogwarts and beyond, Petrificus Totalis obeyed Not the uncertain laws of combat, but the far more predictable logic of narrative convenience. The earliest and most iconic use of the full body bind curse came in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, when Hermione Granger used it against Neville Longbottom. It was a tense moment. The trio needed to sneak out to stop someone from stealing the Philosopher's Stone, and Neville stood in their way trying to uphold the rules. With a quick flick of her wand and the words Petrificus Totalis, Hermione reduced Neville to a stiff board who fell flat on his back. Neville's arms snapped to his sides, his legs sprang together, his whole body rigid. Rowling wrote with precision. It was swift, unchallenged, and devastatingly effective. There were no protective enchantments, no resistance, no flicker of a magical defense from Neville. He simply collapsed, silent and immobilized. The spell had worked perfectly, because the story needed it to work. As the series progressed, the spell retained this almost magical reliability. During the events of the Order of the Phoenix, Harry used Petrificus Totalis to incapacitate Antonin Dolohov, one of Voldemort's most feared Death Eaters. Dolohov, a powerful and seasoned dark wizard, had already caused chaos within the Department of Mysteries, but when Harry shouted the incantation, Dolohov toppled to the ground like a stone. It was hard not to notice the imbalance. In a world where seasoned duelists like Dolohov should logically be shielded, wary, or quick to deflect simple jinxes, the idea that he could be frozen by a fifth-year student's textbook spell seemed far too easy. The scene called for the threat to be temporarily neutralized, and so it was. The magical world established in Rowling's book suggests layers of complexity in combat magic. Shields like Protego, evasive maneuvers, and even silent counter-curses are all within the reach of trained witches and wizards. And yet when it comes to Petrificus Totalis, those layers seem to dissolve into nothingness. The spell cuts through these potential defenses like a scalpel through parchment. Even the least experienced user can cast it successfully under pressure, and the most powerful opponent seems strangely vulnerable to it. It's a spell that behaves less like a tool subject to magical logic and more like a narrative switch, a lever that freezes time so the plot can catch up. In Half-Blood Prince, Draco Malfoy ambushes Harry on the Hogwarts Express using the very same spell. It's a chilling scene. Harry, under the invisibility cloak, tries to eavesdrop on Draco's conversation. But Draco, aware of the presence, acts first. "Petrificus Totalis!" he cries, and Harry is paralyzed instantly. There's no time for Harry to draw his wand, no reaction, no hint of the instincts he's developed over 5 years of magical learning and combat. He becomes a frozen object, left to be stomped on and humiliated. The choice of spell is telling. Draco doesn't use a darker hex or even something creative. He uses the most basic immobilization charm, and it works flawlessly. It works not because Harry is weak, but because the scene required Harry to be rendered helpless, powerless, humiliated. Petrificus Totalis answers the needs of the moment with eerie precision. Even more curiously, the spell never seems to fail. In a world teeming with magical variety and unpredictability, where even simple charms like Lumos or Alohomora can backfire or be blocked, Petrificus Totalis marches forward like a clockwork soldier. Its failure rate is non-existent. Contrast this with spells like Expelliarmus, which can be blocked, dodged, or misfired, or Stupefy, which often requires precise aim and can be deflected. Petrificus Totalis remains the spell that behaves more like a narrative sledgehammer than a magical technique. It becomes the wand-wielding equivalent of a deus ex machina. The problem deepens when we look at the logic of magical combat in Rowling's universe. Duels in the books are often dynamic, unpredictable, and nuanced. Spells are hurled, blocked, dodged. Wizards weave and dance in a choreography of intellect and instinct. But Petrificus Totalis exists outside this framework. It doesn't demand tactical superiority, doesn't provoke counters, and doesn't respect the hierarchy of magical power. It simply works because the writer requires it to work. In this sense, it becomes not a spell but a button, an on-off switch for movement, urgency, and conflict. Nowhere is this more apparent than in the duel-heavy scenes of the Deathly Hallows, where chaos reigns and magic flies in all directions. Even here, Petrificus Totalis keeps its curious power. During the break-in at Gringotts, the trio face multiple enemies, all of them seasoned, dangerous goblins and protective enchantments. Though Petrificus Totalis isn't front and center in this scene, its previous uses cast a long shadow. It raises the unspoken question, why not simply paralyze guards in other situations? Why not use it against Bellatrix Greyback or even Voldemort himself? The answer lies not in magical logic, but in narrative restraint. The spell is called upon only when the plot requires a clean, efficient, and non-lethal solution. It's also important to consider the emotional context. Petrificus Totalis tends to show up in morally safe moments, where the heroes don't want to kill or permanently harm their opponents, but need to get past them. It's the ethical alternative, the spell that allows good characters to stay good while still overcoming obstacles. This makes it doubly convenient. Not only does it succeed when needed, but it aligns perfectly with the hero's moral codes. Hermione wouldn't blast Neville with Stupefy, Harry wouldn't curse Draco with Crucio, but to freeze someone and move on, that's acceptable. It's tidy, it's dramatic, and it's suspiciously perfect. The emotional weight of this convenience is rarely acknowledged in universe. Neville lies on the floor, stiff and helpless, while his friends vanish into the night. He is not harmed, but humiliated. In real magical conflict, the psychological effects of being paralyzed, of being left defenseless, should be significant. But again, Petrificus Totalis is treated like a pause button. Press it, leave, and forget. There's no trauma, no resistance, no fallout. The spell disappears from the character's consciousness the moment it's no longer useful. The narrative favoritism becomes even more glaring when we examine who gets to use Petrificus Totalis. It's always the protagonists, or someone who must succeed in that moment. Rarely, if ever, do we see Death Eaters using it. Their spells are more violent, more explosive. They aim to maim, kill, or overpower. Petrificus Totalis remains curiously absent from the darker side of magic, as if the spell itself is coded for heroes. This moral bias is telling. It reinforces the idea that the spell is less of a tool of magic and more of a plot-preserving mechanism. In practical terms, there should be dozens of ways to neutralize Petrificus Totalis. A skilled wizard could cast Protego to block it, or use finite incantatum to end its effect. There could be resistance charms, magical training to fight through it, or even potions to counteract the paralysis. But none of these options are ever explored. The spell remains untouched, unchallenged, and unexamined. It is the magical equivalent of a cheat code hiding in plain sight. The simplicity of the incantation itself adds to this illusion. 2 Latinized words, a wave of the wand and done. No complex movements, no concentration, no skill barrier. The books do not describe Harry or Hermione practicing it, refining it, or struggling with it. It is absorbed effortlessly as if the spell wants to be used, and it is. Of course, from a literary perspective, spells like Petrificus Totalis offer narrative economy. They allow the writer to bypass messy fight scenes, avoid moral ambiguity, and move the plot forward with a single line. But from a world-building standpoint, they fracture the internal consistency of the magical system. They introduce a magical shorthand that undermines the very complexity the books otherwise strive to build. A spell that always works, regardless of circumstances, robs the world of its tension. This tension, or lack thereof, is critical. Good magical systems rely on balance. Spells should succeed or fail based on context, the caster's ability, the target's defense, environmental interference, or emotional state. Petrificus Totalis ignores all these variables. It is the spell that lands clean every time, the arrow that never misses. It does not participate in the chaos of magic, it sidesteps it. Readers notice, even if only subconsciously, there is something unsatisfying about a spell that always wins. It doesn't teach, it doesn't challenge, it doesn't force the characters to grow. Compare this with expecto patronum, which requires emotional mastery, or legilimens, which involves mental dueling. These spells add texture. Petrificus totalis removes it. Its overuse becomes a narrative crutch. Rather than inventing new ways for the characters to solve problems or escape danger, the books often default to this one-size-fits-all solution. The result is a flattening of magical creativity. When every locked room can be opened by Alohomora and every threat neutralized by Petrificus totalis, the magical world becomes predictable. And predictability is the enemy of wonder. One wonders how different the story might feel if Petrificus totalis had limitations. If it only worked at close range, or only on unshielded targets. If it could be shrugged off with effort, or required a moment of vulnerability. Its unchecked perfection raises uncomfortable questions. Why doesn't everyone use it all the time? Why isn't it the standard issue in aura training? Why didn't the Order of the Phoenix use it more liberally in combat? Perhaps the most telling absence is that of the spell's failure. Nowhere in the books does someone cast Petrificus totalis and miss. Nowhere does it fizzle, backfire, or prove ineffective. This spotless record sets it apart from nearly every other charm in the series. Even powerful spells like Avada Kedavra have missed. Petrificus totalis never does. In the end, Petrificus totalis reveals a quiet flaw in the otherwise rich tapestry of the Harry Potter universe. It is a symbol of convenience, a backstage tool dressed in magical robes. It serves the plot more than the world. And while readers might not question it on the first read, the spell's perfect reliability becomes harder to ignore with every reread. It is magic at its most mechanical, its most obedient, not to the rules of the world, but to the rules of storytelling. Number 18, Fred and George invent anti-Death Eater tools before the war. When Fred and George Weasley opened Weasley's Wizard Wheezes in Diagon Alley, they were seen as jesters in a world teetering on the edge of darkness. Their shop burst into a riot of colour and chaos, offering products like Tung-Tung toffees and skiving snack boxes. The whimsical energy of their store was a welcome distraction from the tension building in the wizarding world. But as the war against Voldemort escalated, the shop's inventory began to look strangely prescient. Hidden among joke products were highly effective defense items, precisely the tools that would later prove indispensable to the Order of the Phoenix and Dumbledore's army. It wasn't just clever. Timing, it felt uncanny. Fred and George, notorious for their mischief, had somehow anticipated the exact shape of the war before it took form. Consider the shield cloaks, enchanted garments that could deflect minor hexes and jinxes. Introduced as an experiment in defensive fashion, they soon became a necessity. When Ministry officials, acting under the influence of Death Eater infiltration, began randomly attacking citizens, these cloaks were suddenly the first line of defense for those unable to defend themselves with wands. In Half-Blood Prince, it is mentioned that the Ministry itself began purchasing batches of protective clothing from the twins. The Ministry's buying shield cloaks from them. Fred said they're the only ones worth having, Ron tells Harry. This is no minor. Footnote: it is a clear signal that Fred and George were crafting real magical defense gear before most of the wizarding population even recognized the need for it. The twins also introduced Peruvian instant darkness powder, initially marketed as a prank item that would allow students to escape teachers or prefects during mischief. But during the infiltration of Hogwarts by Draco Malfoy and the Death Eaters, it became a critical tool. Draco used a pouch of the powder to incapacitate members of the Order and the DA. Everything went pitch black, as though someone had dropped a thick, dark curtain over the entire corridor, the text says in Half-Blood Prince. It's ironic that the product intended for fun was turned into a weapon by the enemy. But the deeper irony lies in how such a product could just as easily be used to escape the clutches of Death Eaters, to hide a victim of the Cruciatus curse, or to protect a child caught in the crossfire. Fred and George had also developed items like decoy detonators, small, skittering objects that made noise and caused distraction. Originally meant for students to create diversions during tests or pranks, they turned into a battlefield tool. In Deathly Hallows, Harry uses one to sneak into Umbridge's office in the Ministry of Magic. He pulled a decoy detonator from his bag and placed it on the floor, the narration goes, leading to a chain of chaos that allowed him to slip past security. This is no longer schoolboy shenanigans. This is espionage. This is guerrilla warfare in a regime where every misstep can mean death. Fred. And George had unwittingly created the perfect spycraft instruments. There were also their anti-imperious hats and headless hats. While the former is briefly referenced, it's the idea behind them that raises eyebrows. The Imperious Curse is one of the unforgivable curses, and resisting it is a skill that even seasoned Aurors struggle with. For the twins to experiment with wearable magical protection from it suggests a depth of magical understanding and concern that goes far beyond comedy. It is not merely clever, it is suspiciously well-timed. The question arises, how did two teenagers expelled from Hogwarts invent magical countermeasures against elite dark magic before even the Ministry took Voldemort's return seriously? One might argue that the twins were simply brilliant. And they were. Their test scores in Charms and Transfiguration were among the best in their year, even if their grades didn't reflect it due to lack of formal completion. But brilliance alone does not explain preparation. There is a crucial difference between talent and prescience. The twins didn't just build spells, they built a supply chain. They established means of mass production and magical testing. They employed goblins, house elves, and possibly even disgruntled ministry workers. When the tide of the war changed, they weren't reacting, they were already prepared. It's easy to overlook this because of the flamboyant presentation of their store. The exploding candies and fart bombs distract from the underlying sophistication. But that's the genius of it. The shop was a mask. It was chaos with structure. Fred and George turned the art of subterfuge into a storefront. And when the war came to Diagon Alley, Weasley's Wizard Wheezes didn't shut down, they transformed into an underground support hub. Their products were smuggled out to members of the Order, safe houses were supplied, defensive tools reached Muggleborns in hiding, all from a place that once sold puking pastilles. One cannot help but draw parallels between the twins' sudden innovation and the shifting tone of the books themselves. By order of the Phoenix, Rowling's narrative was moving from whimsical adventure into political thriller. The timing of Fred and George's departure from Hogwarts, their dramatic escape during Umbridge's reign, and their immediate pivot to building a resistance-like operation through their business seems less like a happy coincidence and more like narrative engineering. They went from comic relief to tacticians in a matter of chapters. It's also important to consider the timeline. Fred and George began testing their joke products during Harry's 4th year, right around the time Voldemort returns at the end of the Triwizard Tournament. Yet even before that, they were experimenting with skiving snack boxes and other complex items. Their research predates the return of the Dark Lord. This begs the question, were they sensing the tension in the air? Or did Dumbledore, always a master of long games, somehow encourage them behind the scenes? While there's no textual evidence of Dumbledore directly mentoring the twins, his tolerance for their mischief and his knowing glances suggest more than casual approval. And what of the fact that the Order of the Phoenix seemed to have easy access to the twins' inventory? Lupin, Tonks, even Kingsley Shacklebolt made passing references to using Weasley's products. At a time when ministry channels were compromised, the idea of sourcing tools from a joke shop seems absurd, unless that joke shop was actually the safest and most effective supplier available. People are queuing out the door, Fred boasted in Half-Blood Prince, but those queues included witches and wizards far more serious than schoolchildren looking for nosebleed nougats. When Fred dies in Deathly Hallows, it feels like more than just the death of a beloved character. It is the death of a leader, a strategist, a manufacturer of hope. His death takes place in the Battle of Hogwarts amid chaos and collapse, but it's worth noting that he dies fighting, not joking. This reinforces the idea that Fred and George were far more embedded in the war effort than readers often give them credit for. The humour was a front, the weapons were real. There's a deeper irony in how the Ministry eventually relied on Fred and George's inventions, even after being the very institution that branded Dumbledore and Harry as lunatics. The regime that promoted Dolores Umbridge ended up buying shield cloaks from the very boys she tried to silence. This inversion of power reveals something profound about the nature of resistance. True innovation often comes from the margins. Fred and George were marginal figures at Hogwarts, rule-breakers, misfits, underachievers by traditional standards, but their magic, free from institutional constraints, became the most agile and effective kind. It's easy to attribute all this to narrative convenience. The books needed allies for Harry, the war needed gadgets. So Rowling, some would argue, retrofitted the Weasley twins into that role. But that explanation strips the story of its organic genius. Fred and George were always more than pranksters, they were visionaries. It's just that their vision was wrapped in laughter and licorice. Even the layout of their store was strategic. Secret compartments, backdoor alleys, and spell-proof safes allowed for the quiet distribution of supplies. When Diagon Alley fell under surveillance, Weasley's Wizard Wheezes didn't fall, it adapted. It shrank into shadows like any good rebel cell. And the twins, in their garish suits and loud voices, became the perfect decoys. No one suspects the avowed clown to be the architect of revolution. There's also the psychological warfare they employed. Love potions, canary creams, and extendable ears weren't just for fun. They disarmed people. They mocked authority. They reminded a frightened public how to laugh in the face of tyranny. And in a world ruled by fear, even laughter can be a weapon. This is why Voldemort never understood the twins. He could dominate minds, but he could not dominate spirit. Fred and George were dangerous because they made people feel human. Their effect on Hogwarts was just as profound. After their departure, the school was not the same. They had become a symbol of rebellion, especially for younger students. Dumbledore's army formed in their wake. Secret meetings, coded communications, and stealth tactics all mirrored the kind of subversive intelligence the twins pioneered. In a way, they laid the groundwork for the resistance from within. They were the prototype. Their story also touches on the theme of underestimated power. Just as Harry was dismissed for his age, Fred and George were dismissed for their laughter. But the true legacy of Weasley's Wizard Wheezes is a battlefield of magic disguised as mischief. The Ministry needed shield cloaks. Harry needed decoy detonators. Muggleborns needed instant darkness. All of them found answers not in the Department of Mysteries, but in a joke shop run by two school dropouts. Fred and George Weasley may not have held wands in formal duels or stood on the front lines of every battle, but their inventions were present in every act of resistance. They gave the wizarding world tools, but more importantly, they gave it permission to laugh, to resist, to fight in clever ways. The real magic wasn't in the products, it was in the timing, and the timing was too perfect to be accidental. Number 19, Harry casts a full Patronus way too easily. Of all the moments in The Prisoner of Azkaban, few are as cinematic and emotionally charged as the one by the lake. Harry Potter, aged 13, stands against a swarm of Dementors, holds his wand to the air, and calls upon a force of magic that only a few adult witches and wizards have ever fully mastered. The stag bursts forth from his wand, silvery and radiant, driving the Dementors away. This moment is meant to mark the transformation of Harry from a frightened child into a courageous young wizard. Yet behind the beauty and triumph lies a curious shadow, one that raises a quiet question. Was this moment too convenient, too perfect, for the narrative's sake? Throughout the third book, Harry's struggle with Dementors is real and terrifying. His first encounter with them is not in battle, but on the Hogwarts Express, where he collapses, reliving the memory of his parents' deaths. No one else reacts with such violence, not Ron, not Hermione, not even the other students nearby. Only Harry is so affected, and it is later explained that this is due to his traumatic past. He hears his mother's final scream as she is murdered. "Not Harry, please no, take me, kill me instead," J.K. Rowling writes, painting a picture of raw fear that defines Harry's deepest wound. This connection between Dementors and memory makes his reaction believable, but that same connection makes what follows feel strangely rushed. Remus Lupin, Harry's new defense against the dark arts teacher, becomes the mentor figure who guides him through the dark forest of fear. Lupin is no ordinary teacher. He is kind, patient, and deeply empathetic. He sees Harry's pain and responds not with pressure, but with understanding. He introduces Harry to the Patronus charm, a spell that requires the caster to focus on their happiest memory and project it into the world as a protective force. But Lupin is careful to set expectations. He tells Harry Afeki, the Patronus is a kind of positive force, a projection of the very things that the Dementor feeds upon: hope, happiness, the desire to survive. This magic is not just difficult, it is psychologically demanding. And yet, within just a few lessons, Harry produces a full corporeal Patronus, an achievement that adult wizards often fail to reach. The Patronus charm is a spell reserved for the best and the strongest. In Order of the Phoenix, we later learn that even trained Aurors struggle with it. During their first meeting in the Room of Requirement, members of Dumbledore's army are stunned to hear that Harry can cast a Patronus. "That's advanced magic, Harry, very advanced," Hermione says. "You could have taken your defense against the Dark Arts Owl in your 3rd year." And yet, when Harry performs the spell before the lake in Azkaban, it is not with hesitation or fear, it is with certainty. He does not falter. He lifts his wand and calls out the words, "Expecto Patronum," and the stag emerges. Strong and blinding. For a boy who had previously collapsed at the mere approach of a Dementor, this leap feels like a narrative shortcut. What makes this event more puzzling is the speed with which it occurs. Harry has only a handful of lessons with Lupin. In one of their early sessions, he fails repeatedly, barely managing to produce a wisp of silvery vapor. His memory isn't strong enough. His will wavers. He is still the boy who watched his mother die. But in the final practice session, something shifts. He tries again and produces a stronger charm. But even here, Rowling writes with caution, Harry raised his wand, a silvery wisp shot out of the end. Not a full Patronus, not yet. That only happens later, under stress, during a time travel-induced moment of desperation. Suddenly, the boy who struggled minutes earlier now commands a majestic creature of light. This moment is not just emotionally loaded, it is loaded with implications. Harry sees what he believes is his father conjuring the Patronus to save both him and Sirius from death, but time travel reveals the twist. It was not his father, but himself. This creates a beautiful paradox. Harry was saved by the version of himself that already knew he could do it. There's poetic magic here, no doubt. But from a logical standpoint, it also makes the feat seem like it arrived not from skill or gradual mastery, but from a need for it to happen for the story's sake. The psychological leap Harry must make in order to cast a Patronus is massive. He must summon joy and hope in the face of soul-draining despair. And his chosen memory? Flying on a broomstick for the first time. It's a charming image, but hardly the monumental emotional force that would stand against death incarnate. It raises a subtle dissonance. If this is enough to fuel a Patronus, why is the spell so rare and difficult? Why do even seasoned adults, who presumably have richer, deeper joys, fail at it? One might argue that Harry's ability stems from his purity of heart or from his moral strength, or even from the narrative thread of being the chosen one. But in The Prisoner of Azkaban, the concept of the chosen one has not yet been introduced. At this point in the series, Harry is still a boy caught in forces far greater than himself. He is not yet a symbol. He is vulnerable, frightened, and in mourning. To give him a victory of such magnitude, one that others can't replicate with years of training, makes his arc feel rushed, unearned. Lupin himself notes the rarity of the feat. After Harry performs the spell, Lupin stares at him in awe. "You did it, you really did it," he says, visibly shocked. There is admiration, but also disbelief. In that disbelief lies the seed of this event's narrative discomfort. If even Lupin, a skilled wizard and former friend of Harry's parents, is stunned by this achievement, then we as readers must ask, did Harry really earn this moment, or did the plot require it? In the broader structure of the book, this act of conjuring the Patronus serves multiple purposes. It provides closure, emotional growth, and a powerful climax. It allows Harry to feel connected to his father. It gives him the agency to save not just himself, but Sirius Black. It allows time travel to work, and yet all of these needs converge too neatly on a single event. The spell works, the Patronus appears, the heroes are saved, and Harry's arc resolves in a blaze of silver light. It is breathtaking and suspiciously perfect. Compare this to the development of other spells throughout the series. Hermione, the brightest witch of her age, often practices relentlessly. Ron takes longer to grasp complex magic and makes frequent mistakes. Even Dumbledore, the most powerful wizard in the series, treats certain types of magic with gravity. But Harry's Patronus comes at a critical narrative moment, and it comes flawlessly. This creates a break in the emotional continuity of the character. It allows plot to override growth. The convenience is not necessarily a flaw in storytelling. It may well be a deliberate mythic choice. The hero's journey often includes a moment of miraculous transformation, when the hero rises above the ordinary. But in Harry's case, this moment arrives so early and with so little internal resistance that it risks making his journey feel scripted rather than organic. He does not struggle long. He does not fail in the moment of need. He succeeds immediately, just in time for the rescue. One cannot help but remember that even Severus Snape, a prodigious student and master of the dark arts, does not conjure a full Patronus until years later. His doe, a reflection of his enduring love for Lily Potter, appears only in Deathly Hallows and only after a lifetime of suffering and grief. The emotional weight behind Snape's Patronus makes Harry's seem lightweight in comparison. The irony, of course, is that Snape's Patronus is dismissed by others, while Harry's is celebrated. Again, narrative timing decides the impact, not emotional depth. It's also worth noting that no other student at Hogwarts is ever shown producing a full Patronus during the original trilogy. When Dumbledore's army practices the spell in Order of the Phoenix, most students struggle. Cho Chang produces a swan, Luna creates a hare, but these are 6th and 7th year students. Harry, 2 years younger, stands apart. His Patronus is not only complete, it is animated, powerful, and intelligent. It chases Dementors, holds its form, and acts independently. It is almost too much. This disparity grows more striking when placed in the context of wizarding education. Hogwarts does not teach the Patronus charm as part of the standard curriculum. It is considered beyond Newt level, a spell for auras and ministry experts. That Harry learns it in secret with only Lupin's guidance makes his success even more startling. It is like a student mastering advanced arithmancy in a week without textbooks. The story asks readers to accept it without hesitation, but the logic strains under the weight. J.K. Rowling builds a world where magic has rules, and those rules are emotionally and psychologically grounded. Complex spells require practice, understanding, and mental strength. The Patronus is the pinnacle of defensive magic, the very embodiment of hope. and yet Harry conjures it in a moment when everything in his life suggests he should fail. No father, no peace, no certainty. He succeeds anyway because the plot needs him to. This moment also dilutes the role of Lupin as a teacher. While he is an excellent mentor, the rapidity with which Harry succeeds makes Lupin's lessons seem almost incidental. Had Harry continued to struggle and only later mastered the spell under pressure, the payoff would have felt richer. Instead, the pacing compresses the arc, turning it into a narrative shortcut rather than a believable progression of skill and courage. Even thematically, the moment risks undermining its own message. The Patronus is meant to symbolize inner strength. It is the light one conjures in darkness. For Harry, who has lived through trauma, that light should be flickering, unstable, and hard-won. But it isn't. It blazes immediately. The book gives readers the catharsis of victory without the pain of failure, and in doing so it cheats the struggle. Of course, there is beauty in the act. There is wonder in the idea of a young boy standing against death and winning. And Harry's Patronus, in the shape of his father's animagus form, is a deeply moving image. But the mechanics of the scene, its perfect timing, its flawless execution, its rare success, suggest that this moment was not earned, but inserted. It is a spectacular scene, but it leaves behind a trace of unease, a question that echoes like a spell half-spoken. Did Harry truly conjure his Patronus, or did the story conjure it for him? Number 20, Dumbledore's army just happens to find the room of requirement. Of all the miracles scattered through the stone corridors of Hogwarts, few are as suspiciously well-timed as the sudden discovery of the room of requirement. The very name whispers convenience, a room that appears only when someone needs it most, a room that transforms to suit not only the purpose, but also the personality of its user. In a school crawling with secrets, wards, and centuries of forgotten history, such a room might have remained undisturbed for another millennium. Yet, when Harry Potter and his friends desperately needed a safe place to train in defiance of the ministry-approved lies of Dolores Umbridge, the castle simply presented them with the perfect gift. It's a moment that slides too easily into place, as if the plot itself opened the door rather than the stone wall opposite the tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, the idea to form a secret defensive group arises not from casual mischief, but from rising dread. Umbridge's refusal to teach actual magic leaves students vulnerable, and Hermione Granger, with her usual sharp perception, proposes they take matters into their own hands. The stakes are serious: expulsion, public shame, even arrest. The students need a sanctuary, a place beyond the ever-tightening grip of the inquisitorial squad. In the middle of this anxiety, Dobby the house elf appears with an impossibly neat solution. "There is a room, sir. A room of requirement," Dobby chirps. "Not..." Only does he know about it, but he knows exactly where it is and how to summon it. It is hard not to see the invisible hand of narrative intervention here. The moment they follow Dobby's instructions, everything clicks too perfectly. It was a large, empty room with wooden floors and mirrored walls as high and wide as a church hall. That first glance already establishes its magic, grandeur, functionality, and anonymity. But as the DA returns again and again, the room reveals more secrets. It can produce cushions, dummies, books, shelves, even galleons for their enchanted coin system. It muffles sound. It cannot be plotted on the Marauder's map. It repels intruders unless they know exactly what to ask for. Every trait is tailored to the student's situation. It does not merely help, it anticipates, as if the castle itself wants them to succeed. This near-sentient response raises a fundamental question. Why does the room wait for Harry? The castle existed for 1,000 years, and surely other students found themselves in desperate need of privacy or purpose. Albus Dumbledore, the greatest wizard of the age, once walked these halls as a boy. Tom Riddle, cunning and obsessive, also studied within these walls. Neither is shown using the room of requirement for anything like the DA's purposes, except, notably, when Riddle hides the diadem of Ravenclaw decades earlier. But even that feels like a different room entirely, a dumping ground cluttered with lost objects, devoid of warmth or intelligence. Why would the room serve Voldemort coldly, but rise up to shelter Harry? Like a loyal friend. Even more suspicious is the timing. Just as Umbridge tightens her grip, just as paranoia spreads and spies multiply, the perfect defense mechanism unlocks. It's not just a room. They gain a base of operations, a center of resistance, a sanctuary. The convenience is staggering. In a book heavy with political dread and psychological fatigue, the room of requirement brings light, hope, and safety. It almost reads like the deus ex machina of classical tragedy, an unexpected solution dropped from the heavens. Only here it is dropped from a sentient, enchanted ceiling. J.K. Rowling does hint at Hogwarts being more than stone and spell. The castle, it seems, watches. Doors vanish, staircases rotate, paintings gossip and protect. But the room of requirement is something else. It doesn't just react to magic, it understands desire. It reads intentions. When Draco Malfoy later uses it to create a passageway for Death Eaters, it responds just as quickly to his dark purpose as it once did to Harry's hope. This fluid morality, this selective response to need, makes the room almost too convenient. It is not a neutral space. It is a narrative engine. It appears when the hero needs it. It disappears when the story moves on. Hermione herself reflects on the room's uncanny helpfulness. "It's brilliant," she says, breathless. It's like Hogwarts wants us to fight back." And that is the most telling line of all. It reframes the castle not as a passive setting, but as a character, one with loyalty and choice. Yet if Hogwarts truly wants anything, why doesn't it offer help more freely? Why didn't the room of requirement appear to Neville Longbottom when he cried alone after his parents didn't recognize him? Why didn't it open to Harry when he lay shivering in the cupboard under the stairs, longing for escape? The room's logic is not moral, it is narratively convenient. There's also the troubling matter of exclusivity. The room's protection is perfect, almost too perfect. The DA grows stronger without interference. Their training sessions are never discovered by accident. Not once does a curious student stumble in. Not once does Filch or Umbridge brush past the entrance at just the wrong moment. The training arc could have collapsed with one mistaken footstep, but the story needs them to succeed, so the room wraps them in enchanted secrecy as if fate itself is on their side. Even the way to summon the room borders on the theatrical. One must walk past the wall 3 times thinking of what is needed. It's a ritual almost too absurd to trust, and yet it works instantly. Harry does not practice. He does not fail first. His intention is pure, his need desperate, and the room obeys. That it works the very first time feels like dramatic exaggeration, a fast-forward button pressed by the author to keep the story moving. In real life, or even in fantasy life with stakes, such moments would be earned through trial and error. Here, they are gifted. When later events connect the room to the lost diadem of Ravenclaw, the mystery only deepens. Harry stumbles into the exact same room during a completely different crisis, needing not a training ground but a hidden object. The room adjusts accordingly, now becoming a junk-filled labyrinth. Again, it bends to the hero's will. Again, it supplies exactly what is needed. And again, its usefulness vanishes once the plot no longer demands it. After the war, the room returns to dormancy. It had served its function, its narrative purpose is spent. This raises a broader discomfort about agency. Are the characters truly shaping their destiny? Or are they walking a path paved by a school that conspires in their favor? If Hogwarts aligns itself with Harry, is it merely reflecting the will of the reader? Is the Room of Requirement a magical artifact or a literary device dressed in enchanted bricks? The deeper one looks, the more it seems like the latter. The room's magic is not consistent or predictable, it is poetic, metaphorical. It's as if Rowling asked, what does Harry need most at this point in the story? and the room appeared to answer her, not him. There's also the subtle manipulation of power. The DA becomes not just a club but a crucible. It forges Neville into a leader, Luna into a hero, Ginny into a fighter. These transformations are beautiful, even essential, but they happen in a vacuum of risk, a perfectly cushioned environment. The room eliminates uncertainty. It offers all the right tools at all the right times. In doing so, it removes the element of human error that makes struggle meaningful. Growth without danger is not truly growth, it is rehearsal, and the room of requirement is a rehearsal stage in disguise. In contrast, other magical spaces in the series feel earned. The Chamber of Secrets must be unlocked through language, risk, and blood. The Triwizard Maze is filled with mortal peril. Even the Mirror of Erised demands introspection and restraint, but the Room of Requirement is simply given. It never challenges its users to understand it. It does not demand a price. Its benevolence is unconditional. That makes it powerful, but also dramatically hollow. A perfect room solves too many problems too easily. To accept the room as just another magical quirk of Hogwarts is to overlook how precisely it fits into the structure of the fifth book. Order of the Phoenix is the darkest entry so far. Its tone is oppressive. Harry is isolated, angry, doubted. The DA represents resistance and rebirth. It is the moment when students reclaim power, when youth confronts authority. For that moment to work, they need a space, not just any space, a magical cradle. And so the story gives them one. That it appears under such timely, specific conditions feels less like magic and more like orchestration. What's more unsettling is the precedent it sets. If Hogwarts can offer this kind of sanctuary, where was it when other students were in danger? Where was it during the First War against Voldemort? Why did Lily and James, brilliant students and hunted rebels, never find such a refuge? The Room of Requirement appears as if it had been waiting for Harry's generation, waiting for its chance to shine, but that transforms it from law to plot device. It exists not because it makes sense, but because the story required it, just like its name. Even Dobby's knowledge of the room feels engineered. Why would a house elf bound by low status and forbidden zones know about such a secret place? Why would no teacher or ghost ever mention it? Why is it absent from marauder lore when the map reveals nearly every corner of the castle? Its sudden introduction late in the series is suspicious, not organically discovered but narratively deployed. Dobby, bless his loyalty, becomes the perfect messenger. The room could not have been found without him, and he appears just in time to deliver its existence like a narrative telegram. None of this erases the beauty of the Room of Requirement. It is a fan favorite for a reason. Its mystery, adaptability, and protective warmth are deeply appealing. It gives hope when all else fails. But in dissecting the story, one must acknowledge the strings behind the curtain. This is not a room born of centuries of lore. It is a room born of urgency, designed to make the story flow. That it does so well only proves its genius, but it also proves its artificiality. In the end, the Room of Requirement is both a triumph of imagination and a symptom of convenience. It embodies the magic of Hogwarts and the hand of the author at once. Its timing, functionality, and morality all point toward narrative favor. It helps the hero not because he earned it, but because the story needed it. And that is what makes it so fascinating and so suspicious. Number 21. Voldemort chooses his own downfall by targeting Harry. Voldemort stood at a crossroads the night he chose to mark Harry Potter. In his mind, it was not a choice between equals. It was a hunt, a predator striking first to prevent a threat. The prophecy, spoken in a trembling voice by Sybil Trelawney during a job interview, foretold that a child would be born at the end of July to parents who had defied Voldemort 3 times, and that this child would have the power to vanquish the Dark Lord. It could have been Harry, it could have been Neville Longbottom. Yet Voldemort, believing himself invincible and guided by arrogance rather than caution, singled out Harry Potter. This single act of judgment did not merely seal his future. It shaped Harry's identity. The boy became the scarred survivor, the symbol of resistance, and eventually the instrument of Voldemort's downfall. A curious fate indeed, the villain crowning his own destroyer. There is a breathtaking simplicity in how this choice sets everything in motion, and yet beneath that simplicity lies a web of convenient narrative consequences. Voldemort's action of targeting Harry over Neville did not just turn Harry into the protagonist of the wizarding world's greatest story, it also granted him a piece of the Dark Lord himself. The killing curse, meant to annihilate, shattered Voldemort's soul instead, and part of that broken fragment latched itself onto the baby boy. By his own wand, Voldemort inadvertently created the only person who could truly understand him, resist him, and, in the end, defeat him. "He took my blood," Harry says in the final book. Believing it would strengthen him, he took into himself a tiny bit of the enchantment my mother laid upon me. The irony is sharp. Voldemort's every action that night, done with the intention of preserving his power, ultimately ensured its destruction. Dumbledore later explains the strange poetry of this moment in Half-Blood Prince, saying, "You are the true master of death, Harry, because the true master does not seek to run away from death. He accepts that he must die." And yet it is in Order of the Phoenix that Dumbledore makes the most significant observation about Voldemort's mistake. It was, indeed, Voldemort's decision to mark you as his equal. This sentence alters everything. The prophecy itself is ambiguous, conditional. It predicts a child with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord, and not a child who will, but Voldemort chooses, and in choosing, he fulfills the very destiny he fears. The prophecy might never have come to pass had he ignored it or interpreted it differently. Instead, he created the only circumstances under which it could be true. From a narrative standpoint, this is a masterstroke of storytelling symmetry. Yet it also feels, suspiciously, too perfect. Harry's survival is not merely due to his mother's sacrifice. It is the result of Voldemort's own obsessive pride, of his need to control fate, and of the bizarre convenience that the most dangerous man in the wizarding world makes the worst possible decision at the exact moment the story needs a hero. The Dark Lord, in his quest for domination, orchestrates his own legend. He doesn't just fail to kill a baby. He sets the baby on a path toward becoming the only one who can end him. A more logical villain might have sent others to investigate the prophecy more thoroughly. He might have sought to eliminate both children, but Voldemort does not think like a strategist. He acts like a tyrant who cannot imagine error. Consider the alternate path, the one not taken. Neville Longbottom, son of Aurors and born within the same time frame, could have been the child Voldemort feared. In fact, many fans have speculated on what might have happened if Voldemort had gone after Neville instead. Would Lily Potter still have died for Harry, placing ancient magic upon him? Would Harry have become just another orphan? Or would Voldemort have succeeded in killing Neville and thus dodged the entire prophecy altogether? These questions hang heavy in the air, and the story seems to quietly sidestep them. But in the fabric of the canon, it is stated clearly. Voldemort's decision made Harry the chosen one. As Dumbledore tells Harry, "You are not the chosen one because of the prophecy, Harry, but because you chose to fight him." This places the narrative burden of Harry's role on Voldemort himself, creating an elegant loop where villainy seeds its own destruction. And yet it also raises the question, how convenient is this twist? The story rests on a structure where fate appears to be manipulated not by gods or higher magic, but by the very villain trying to avoid it. Voldemort, the architect of fear, effectively builds the foundation of his own ruin. It is narratively clean, suspiciously so. The villain acts, the hero is created, the prophecy is fulfilled, and the circle closes. It's poetic, it's powerful, but it's also startlingly neat. That Harry receives part of Voldemort's power as a consequence of this attack is a further layer of convenience. Harry's ability to speak parcel tongue, his mental connection to Voldemort, and his instinctive understanding of the Dark Lord's mind are all explained by this transferred fragment of soul. It offers the story a shortcut, an easy way for Harry to access information others cannot, a reason for him to be uniquely suited for this battle. But these gifts are not earned. They are bestowed through trauma. The lightning scar is both wound and window, a tool of insight gifted by the villain's own wand. The boy hero is defined not by his lineage or his training, but by the accident of being attacked. Voldemort's choice is therefore not only the trigger of conflict, it is the engine that powers every meaningful development in Harry's life. Without it, there is no boy who lived. Without it, there is no connection between minds, no dramatic visions, no recurring dreams of snakes and graveyards. Every clue Harry receives, every warning of danger, every brush with death, all of it stems from this single moment where Voldemort decides to act, and fate decides to play along. The plot threads are not simply tied to this night, they are born from it. And in that tight construction lies a troubling implication. The villain is not merely the enemy. He is the author of the hero's story. Even the prophecy itself functions more like a mirror than a map. It reveals only what the listener believes it reveals. Trelawney's words are vague, conditional, and open to interpretation, but Voldemort hears them and acts as if they are an absolute decree. This interpretation is what activates the prophecy's true power. In this way, Voldemort is not reacting to destiny. He is activating it. Had he dismissed the prophecy or taken steps to neutralize both boys, he might have remained in power, but his paranoia, his need to control fate, pushes him to act in precisely the way that fulfills the dark future he fears. It is almost as though he cannot escape narrative gravity. What's more, the moment of the curse's rebound, the magical explosion that leaves Voldemort bodiless and Harry marked, serves to transfer more than just power. It gives Harry a myth. The world begins to believe in him, to whisper his name, to look at him with awe and expectation. Voldemort creates not just an opponent, but a legend. The boy who lived is not a title Harry earns. It is one he inherits, given meaning, only because the villain failed to kill him. In this, Voldemort doesn't just lose power, he loses the control of the narrative. The people rally not around him, but around a child he elevated through failure. The narrative impact is also emotional. Harry grows up cursed by this unwanted fame. He is never given a chance to choose a quiet life. Voldemort's choice haunts him even before he understands what it means. In Order of the Phoenix, Harry rages at Dumbledore, screaming, "You've been raising me like a pig for slaughter!" This line, raw and accusatory, draws attention to the uncomfortable truth. Harry's life has been shaped by decisions made before he could speak. But unlike many tragic heroes, Harry is not undone by this truth. He accepts it and transcends it, but the fact remains. Voldemort's decision manufactured both the trauma and the triumph. It is hard not to feel the guiding hand of narrative necessity here. The story needs a hero, and so the villain creates one. The story needs a prophecy, and so it is fulfilled through deliberate misunderstanding. The story needs a final confrontation, and so it ensures that only one can live while the other survives. These are the pillars of mythic storytelling, the echoes of ancient tales, and yet when placed under scrutiny they begin to look less like fate and more like convenience. Deliberate choices by the author disguised as cosmic irony. Even the timing is suspiciously precise. The prophecy is spoken shortly before the end of July. Harry is born on July 31st. Voldemort strikes when the boy is barely a year old. All of these elements align perfectly, as though time itself is conspiring to deliver a protagonist into the heart of conflict. And yet all of these events are guided not by unseen forces, but by Voldemort's singular will. He chooses the date, he chooses the house, he chooses the target. The outcome, in all its mythic symmetry, is his doing, and that is perhaps the most curious narrative twist of all, the villain who writes his own ending. What this does, in effect, is remove a layer of moral complexity. Voldemort is not only evil, he is wrong. Spectacularly, poetically wrong. His inability to love, to understand sacrifice, to see beyond power, makes him blind to the consequences of his own actions. The story rewards this blindness with poetic justice, but in doing so it creates a structure where the antagonist's failure is not only expected but essential. Voldemort cannot succeed because his failure is built into the foundation of the plot. The story cannot function unless he is fatally arrogant. This raises a final, unsettling thought. Is Voldemort's downfall fate or fiction? Is the prophecy a magical inevitability or a cleverly disguised narrative device? The story leans on magic to justify its structure, but it is magic used with surgical precision to guide the plot. Every spell, every sacrifice, every wand movement, all of it serves to reinforce the idea that the villain, in trying to dominate fate, ensures it instead. It is beautiful storytelling, it is deeply satisfying, but it is also unmistakably convenient. And so, in the quiet moments of rereading, one cannot help but feel that Voldemort was not merely defeated. He was written into defeat, not by destiny, but by the necessity of a story that needed a chosen one, and created one, not through prophecy, but through the hand of the villain himself. Number 22. Dobby dies at the most emotionally painful moment. When the walls of Malfoy Manor began to close in, it felt like the end. Hermione Granger had been tortured upstairs, Ron Weasley was screaming in desperation, and Harry Potter, bound and helpless, watched as Bellatrix Lestrange threatened to kill them all. The air was thick with terror and blood. The moment was as bleak as it could be. And just then, out of the darkness, came Dobby, a free elf, full of defiance, appearing as if summoned by the collective cry of despair. He did not knock, he did not hesitate. He arrived with precision at the exact second the heroes needed him, and in doing so he gave them life. But as they landed on the sandy shore, the relief was shattered by the glint of a silver blade embedded in his chest. Dobby the house elf died in Harry's arms, whispering that it was a beautiful place to be with friends. There is no doubt the scene was a triumph of emotional storytelling. The sheer contrast between hope and tragedy made it unforgettable. The readers wept, the characters froze in disbelief. For the first time in hundreds of pages, something good had happened, and then it was ripped away. But when the tears dried, some could not help but question the machinery behind the heartbreak. Why did Dobby die? Not narratively, there the answer was clear. But why in the world of logic and magic, where rules still matter? The blade thrown by Bellatrix was mundane. Dobby had just performed wandless magic of extraordinary precision. Apparition into Malfoy Manor, a place heavily guarded, was considered impossible. But he had done it. Why then did he fall to a simple knife? J.K. Rowling presents Dobby as one of the most magically gifted beings in the series. In Chamber of Secrets, Dobby is able to apparate within the magically protected walls of Privet Drive and Hogwarts. Dumbledore, one of the most powerful wizards alive, states that house elves have a different kind of magic, one that even surpasses some wizarding limits. It is this unique ability that allows Dobby to penetrate wards that block regular magical transport. If such power exists, why could Dobby not apparate away the moment he saw the knife? Why did he not conjure a shield? Why did the elf who could stop a bludger mid-air and levitate cakes not sense a blade whirling toward him? The scene works because it is devastating. Harry, who has lost so much, clutches the small body of a creature who once only wanted to serve and be loved. He digs the grave by hand. He refuses magic in honor of Dobby's freedom. It is an echo of humanity amidst the war. The emotional architecture is flawless, but the logistical scaffolding begins to crack under scrutiny. Dobby appears just late enough to let the tension build and he dies just soon enough to leave the deepest wound. It is poetry, not reality, but the Harry Potter world, even in its wildest moments, still strives for internal consistency. Dobby's death feels too orchestrated. It is not the only time Rowling bends the magical rules for narrative drama, but it is perhaps the most emotionally manipulative. Consider how quickly Dobby arrives. He appears the moment Luna Lovegood and Ollivander are mentioned in captivity, just as Harry's options have dwindled to zero. There is no established magical channel through which Dobby can sense distress. He simply knows, as if he heard the author's call rather than the characters. When Harry whispers for help, Dobby is there. It's beautiful, but implausible. This is not an elf tracking a known enemy. It is a deus ex machina hidden in plain sight. Then there is the knife. Bellatrix Lestrange throws it in blind panic. The blade slices through the spinning apparition spell and finds Dobby's heart. It is a shot with no aim, no logic, and no time for magical countermeasures. It is also oddly perfect. A final cruelty delivered by the most sadistic character, causing the death of the purest. Poetic? Yes. But, given the context, difficult to swallow. Why is Dobby not already gone by the time the knife hits? He has already apparated once inside the manor. He should be long gone with the second jump. There is no indication that Bellatrix is fast enough to interrupt magical travel. No spell, no flash, just metal meeting destiny. There's a broader implication in Dobby's magic that remains suspiciously ignored. If house elves can do what Dobby does, if they can bypass magical wards, apparate anywhere, and move people with them, why are they not used in every mission? Why are the Order of the Phoenix members dying to infiltrate places that a house elf could enter uninvited? Kreacher, another house elf, later becomes essential in helping Harry track Horcruxes. His powers are acknowledged, yet no one thinks to use house elves for rescue, for combat, or for espionage. It's not only a missed opportunity, it's an inconsistent gap in strategy. Rowling explains little of house elf limits. We know they can perform powerful magic, but we are never told their vulnerabilities. In fact, house elves are often presented as near indestructible servants. Dobby levitates, blasts wizards, and escapes death traps. The idea that he cannot avoid a flying knife or that he lacks reflexes to move contradicts everything we've been shown, unless, of course, the knife was meant not to pierce flesh, but the heart of the reader. It was never about what Dobby could do. It was about what Rowling needed him to do. The emotional context of the scene overrides logic. Harry had to lose something precious again. The pain had to be renewed. The stakes had to rise. Killing Ron or Hermione would fracture the trio. Killing Luna or Ollivander would not resonate enough. But killing Dobby, a symbol of kindness, innocence, and sacrifice, was perfect. It marked the shift from survival to vengeance. Harry becomes colder, more resolved, and less forgiving after Dobby's death. He buries him without magic. He honors him as a man. But this transformation hinges on a knife that, narratively speaking, had nowhere to land but in Dobby's chest. There's also something strangely convenient in how Dobby finds them. The last time we saw the elf, he was with Aberforth. No one tells him where to go, no one gives him a mission. He simply appears as if by prophetic instinct. It undermines the intricate network of communication that governs the rest of the story. Order members use patronus messengers. They rely on coded messages, on planned rendezvous. But Dobby simply knows. His arrival is more divine than magical. And while it works in a mythic sense, it fractures the realism Rowling otherwise maintains. Even the idea of elves being excluded from the larger fight becomes harder to justify. If Dobby could do this once, why not again? Why not use Kreacher to sneak into Gringotts, or into the Ministry, or into Voldemort's hiding places? If house elves are this resourceful, the war could have taken a very different turn. But Rowling avoids this. The elves are kept on the sidelines, except when their appearance serves a symbolic function. Dobby's death is not about power, it is about emotion, and the narrative sacrifices plausibility to achieve it. In many ways, Dobby functions as a magical wildcard. He represents a power outside the known limits of wizards, but Rowling restricts his use. He appears only when the story demands a miracle, when Harry is stuck at Malfoy Manor, when no one else can save them. It's not that Dobby couldn't have intervened earlier, it's that he shouldn't have, because the plot wasn't ready. That is not Dobby's flaw, it is the author's hand slipping into the frame. The most painful part is that it works. Readers cry. Viewers remember the scene as one of the most heart-wrenching in the entire series. The small elf dying for his friends, whispering his final words, offering beauty in a world of horror. It's perfect drama. But drama built on fragile logic. It asks the reader to suspend belief not in magic, but in timing. And in a world where rules are sacred, where protections, wards and spells are established, it feels too convenient. Such a beautiful place to be with friends, he says. The line echoes through the final chapters. Harry returns to that moment again and again. But what lingers under the beauty is the sense of orchestration. Dobby had to die, not because he failed, but because the story demanded a sacrifice. He becomes a martyr, not by fate, but by design. This is not a unique flaw in the series. Rowling often uses timing as an emotional tool. Characters arrive just in time. Wands fly just before death strikes. Luck and coincidence masquerade as destiny. But in Dobby's case, it's harder to ignore, because he's not a wizard. He is something more mysterious. And when mystery is used as an excuse, not an answer, the magic begins to fray. There's also the strange silence afterward. No one investigates how Bellatrix's knife broke through apparition. No one questions whether other elves could help. The moment is sealed, emotionally satisfying, and closed. It becomes a holy memory, but in doing so it shuts the door on deeper questions. Why do house elves not have defenses? Why did no one think to shield him? Why does Harry, a wizard constantly researching protection, never ask? Dobby's death is not just the end of an arc, it is the punctuation mark on a manipulation. A reminder that the most painful moments in stories are often the most constructed. Rowling builds it with precision, and perhaps that's why it stings, because we see the strings even as we feel the tears. The truth is, Dobby's sacrifice gives meaning to the next stage of the war. Harry matures, he leads. He stops asking for guidance and begins acting. But that weight could have been carried another way, a different character, a different loss. The choice to make it, Dobby speaks to a calculated cruelty, a desire to ensure maximum emotional fallout. It is not a natural death, it is a crafted one. Readers do not resent the sadness, they resent the hand that pushes too hard. Dobby deserved more than to die as a plot device. He deserved logic. He deserved a world where his power was not turned off to serve a script. But perhaps that was the point, to show that even magic, when needed most, can be silenced by something as small as a blade, not because it must, but because it's convenient. Number 23. Harry doesn't realize he speaks Parseltongue until the story needs it. Of all the moments that shape the trajectory of Harry Potter's story, few are as subtly convenient as the incident at the zoo. It begins so simply, almost innocently, as Harry peers through the glass of a snake enclosure during Dudley Dursley's birthday trip. The scene is designed to feel mundane, boring even, just another day in the grey, suppressed life of a neglected boy. Yet within a few pages, this quiet moment becomes a doorway into something far more mysterious. The glass vanishes, the snake escapes, and more importantly, it speaks to Harry. "Brazil, here I come. Thanks, sis, amigo." These few words alter the course of everything that follows, and yet the narrative treats the event with curious nonchalance. It's as if the moment exists purely to give readers a taste of magic before the real story begins. But is that all it is, or is it a carefully crafted sleight of hand hiding a deeper contrivance beneath the surface? There is something suspiciously neat about the timing. Harry, a boy who has never encountered anything magical in his life, not overtly anyway, is suddenly thrust into a situation that awakens one of the rarest magical abilities known to the wizarding world, Parseltongue. It doesn't manifest during a particularly emotional moment or in response to danger. It emerges casually as if it had always been there, waiting for this exact, narratively convenient moment. This is a power so rare that even within the wizarding community it is feared, and yet there is no foreshadowing, no prior indication that Harry might possess this gift. He simply hears the snake talk and replies in kind, unaware that anything unusual has occurred. Only later will readers understand the implications, but at this moment the ease of it is startling. Parseltongue, as the series later emphasizes, is not just rare. It is associated almost exclusively with Salazar Slytherin and his bloodline. When Harry demonstrates this ability in his second year, the reaction is immediate and intense. Students distance themselves from him. Whispers of being the heir of Slytherin spread like fire. Even Professor McGonagall and Dumbledore respond with concern. And yet, this power was first revealed in a public place, surrounded by Muggles, long before Harry knew what Hogwarts even was. Why? Did no one investigate this? Why did Dumbledore, who admits to watching Harry closely, not consider this moment a warning sign? It's tempting to argue that the snake incident at the zoo was minor, that the magical community simply didn't know. But that explanation grows flimsy under scrutiny. Dumbledore is not careless. Hagrid later tells Harry, "Ye think you're the only one who's ever escaped from them Dursleys," implying that the magical world kept an eye on him. When Mrs. Figg, a squib, is revealed to have been living near Harry his whole life, it's clear that the surveillance was real. So how could something as significant as speaking Parseltongue slip under the radar? One possibility is that Dumbledore knew and chose not to act, yet this too is unsettling. Dumbledore, the chess master of the series, does nothing without reason. If he suspected Harry had inherited the ability from Voldemort, as he later admits, then allowing Harry to grow up unaware of the implications seems reckless. He confesses in The Order of the Phoenix, "I cared about you too much. I cared more for your happiness than your knowing the truth." But even that confession doesn't cover the years of silence that followed the zoo incident. Why didn't he at least question Harry about it? Test him for other dark magic residue? This question becomes heavier when we consider the nature of Parseltongue. It's not just a skill, it's a marker, it's a red flag. Tom Riddle used it to control the basilisk. Slytherin used it to create a secret chamber. The language is so feared that most wizards and witches are horrified when they hear it spoken. When Harry opens his mouth and the hissing begins, it doesn't sound like words to anyone else. It sounds unnatural. In the Chamber of Secrets, Ron says, "You were there, you heard me, I spoke a different language." To which Harry replies, "I only realized I was speaking it when I saw the look on their faces." That sense of unconsciousness, of not even realizing he was speaking Parseltongue, was also present in the zoo. That unconsciousness itself is a narrative convenience. It allows Harry to be ignorant of his own dark connection until it becomes necessary for the plot. Until the Chamber of Secrets needs to be opened, until the reader must begin to doubt Harry's identity. This setup is clever, but it leans on an unsettling question. Why was the ability dormant until the exact moment it could best hook a reader into the magical world? Not earlier, not later, just at the moment when magic first reveals itself as wondrous and dangerous. It's worth comparing this moment to other instances of accidental magic. In the same book, Harry causes a pane of glass to disappear, but he also makes his hair grow back overnight, jumps onto a rooftop, and shrinks a horrible sweater. These are whimsical, childlike accidents presented as harmless signs of latent power. But the snake scene isn't like those. It is targeted, directed. The snake understands Harry, it communicates, and Harry understands it in return. That is not whimsical. That is specific, deep-rooted, and chilling. Moreover, it's a magical event that affects the real world in a very visible way. The glass doesn't simply shimmer or crack, it vanishes and the snake escapes. This is a zoo in the middle of London filled with tourists. The fallout should have been enormous. Zoo officials would have been baffled. News headlines should have followed. And yet, like so many early magical events in the series, it's brushed off. The Dursleys are angry, of course, but they chalk it up to mischief, not magic. The rest of the world moves on. This, too, feels like narrative sleight of hand, a way to let the magical world intrude just enough to intrigue, but not enough to demand real consequences. And then there is the snake itself. It thanks Harry. That's not just a linguistic accident. That implies sentience, awareness, gratitude. This is not a mindless beast slithering away. It is a creature aware of its captivity, speaking a human-like farewell before departing. This raises another question. Do all snakes speak like this? Could Harry have discovered his ability earlier if he had simply talked to a garden snake? If the gift is innate and tied to his soul through Voldemort, why does it only surface now? The answer seems clear. Because this is the first time the plot needs it to, the timing is suspiciously perfect. Harry is lonely, isolated, and desperate for something to make his life meaningful. The zoo incident gives him that moment of wonder, that glimmer of identity. It's no coincidence that this happens just before his Hogwarts letter arrives. It primes both Harry and the reader for what's to come, but in doing so it sacrifices logic for emotional payoff. From a storytelling perspective, this is forgivable. The snake scene is iconic. It's mysterious, funny, eerie, and satisfying. It tells us that Harry is special before Harry knows it himself. But from a world-building perspective, it leaves a trail of unanswered questions. Why has Harry never heard the language before, even in a world filled with pets, books, and reptilian motifs? Why didn't Voldemort's fragment awaken this part of Harry earlier, especially during emotional distress? Surely his cupboard under the stairs provided enough suffering to trigger something. Even later in the series, when the connection between Harry and Voldemort becomes clear, the parcel tongue ability remains a puzzle. In the Deathly Hallows, Harry loses the ability after Voldemort's soul fragment is destroyed. This retroactively confirms that the power was not his to begin with, and yet its first appearance happens in the most casual, unexplained setting imaginable. Not in a dream, not in danger, at a zoo birthday party, a moment of narrative contrast so sharp it begs analysis. That the moment is never revisited is perhaps the most curious thing of all. Harry never reflects on it, never returns to the memory. Even when he learns that he's a Parselmouth, he doesn't recall the zoo as the first time it happened. He doesn't wonder how he knew the snake's words. He doesn't ask Dumbledore about it. And Dumbledore, for all his wisdom and watchfulness, never brings it up either. It's as if the narrative itself has forgotten the moment once it served its purpose. There's an emotional brilliance to this. By giving Harry a secret he doesn't understand, the story makes the reader feel like they know something he doesn't. It builds anticipation, it sets the stage, but it also bends logic. Harry's abilities are too conveniently timed, too perfectly revealed. The magical world is too conveniently silent. There is no ripple effect, no consequence, no follow-up. That silence is telling. The magical world, especially under Dumbledore's watch, is not one to leave such things to chance. Every student is sorted, analysed, traced. Harry's link to Voldemort is the central mystery of the entire saga. And yet the first clue, a boy talking to a snake, happens in plain sight and nobody seems to care. It's difficult to reconcile that with the level of control and awareness displayed by the same characters later in the series. As if the early books belong to a slightly looser reality, one willing to trade consistency for charm. And yet, the charm works. The zoo scene captures a child's fantasy. What if I could talk to animals? What if I had magic inside me and didn't know it? It's a perfect introduction to Harry's world, but for a reader looking back aware of what Parseltongue truly means, the convenience becomes impossible to ignore. It's the kind of moment that makes perfect sense in Chapter 2 and absolutely none in Book 7. Perhaps this is the price of magic, not just in Harry's world, but in storytelling itself. The moments that dazzle us most often live on the edge of credibility. They sparkle because they are unexpected, because they fit so well. But when the dust settles, we ask, was this planned, or was it simply too perfect? Number 24. Voldemort forgets legilimency at the worst time. Voldemort stood in the forbidden forest, his wand raised, his soul stretched taut across the air, like a taut string on a violin. Harry Potter, the boy he had sought to destroy for nearly 2 decades, stood silently before him, offering himself like a lamb to the slaughter. The moment should have rung with triumph, and yet something unspoken passed in the heavy silence. A flicker of hesitation, a beat missed in a dance that had been rehearsed by fate. For all his mastery of magic, Lord Voldemort made a choice that night which defied reason. He did not reach into Harry's mind. He did not scan it with legilimency, a gift he had honed and wielded like a scalpel. He did not search for lies, even as one stood trembling in front of him. This wasn't the first time Voldemort had shown a precise ability to penetrate thoughts. As early as the Order of the Phoenix, he had not only accessed Harry's emotions, but planted visions within them. The Department of Mystery's ambush had been orchestrated through such manipulation. The dreams, the visions, they're real, Harry had once told Dumbledore. Voldemort had learned to exploit the link between their minds, a connection that allowed him to slip past the doors of Harry's mind and manipulate him into believing Sirius Black was in mortal danger. That deception nearly cost lives. The Dark Lord had demonstrated beyond doubt that he could fish out truths and implant falsehoods, so why, on the night when truth was most crucial, did he not even try? In that very forest where death had claimed many and where the final chapter of war was about to be written, Voldemort chose ignorance over clarity. He stood before a 17-year-old boy and delivered what he thought would be the final blow in a war that began the night he tried to murder a baby. But Voldemort, master of deceit and mental manipulation, did not attempt to read Harry's thoughts. He did not ask himself why the boy had arrived alone, wandless, and yet so eerily calm. The man who trusted no one, who suspected betrayal in every shadow, suddenly accepted everything at face value. Was it arrogance, or was it a script written by destiny? When Voldemort cast the killing curse, Harry fell. The forest held its breath, and yet the sole tether between them, the fragment of Voldemort that lived within Harry, was the true victim. Voldemort did not understand this, but what's truly remarkable is that he made no effort to understand. He didn't check. He simply assumed that Harry was dead. He had Nagini check for signs of life. He watched Harry's limp form, but he did not use legilimency to ensure the finality of his victory. "Harry Potter is dead," he proclaimed to the terrified defenders at Hogwarts, parading Harry's body like a trophy, his voice echoing with triumph that, as readers know, was built on illusion. This choice is jarring when held against earlier behavior. In The Half-Blood Prince, Snape reminds Bellatrix that Voldemort is the most accomplished legilimens the world has ever seen. We know that Voldemort often relied on this power to extract confessions, find spies, and enforce loyalty. During the First Wizarding War, Death Eaters feared even thinking treacherous thoughts near their master. He had built an empire on knowledge, on the ability to sense disloyalty before it could bear fruit. And yet here, with Harry, whose survival would destroy everything, Voldemort took no such measures. He relied on his own sense of drama. He acted not as a general, but as a stage actor seeking applause. Harry, meanwhile, lay in a dreamlike limbo, speaking to Albus Dumbledore. The elder wizard tells him, "He took your blood believing it would strengthen him. He took into his body a tiny piece of your mother's protection." This was crucial. Harry could not die at Voldemort's hand, not fully, not while his mother's enchantment still flowed in the enemy's veins. Dumbledore, master of secrets and timing, had orchestrated events so that Harry could act as a sacrificial protector, but even this plan depended on one factor: Voldemort's ignorance. Had he used legilimency to probe Harry's mind and found Dumbledore's influence or the survival of the Horcrux, the story would have changed drastically. The real question, then, is whether Voldemort's failure was born from hubris or narrative convenience. From a storytelling perspective, the omission is striking. It is the single most decisive moment in the series. The enemy believes the hero dead, the hero rises again. Mythology thrives on such arcs. But within the logic of the wizarding world, it reads almost as a lapse. It is the equivalent of a master chess player ignoring the obvious threat to his king. The Voldemort we've known would have questioned, would have verified, would have sought control over the moment. But here, he simply declares victory. One might argue that the connection between Harry and Voldemort was severed after the Horcrux died, that perhaps Voldemort couldn't read Harry's mind anymore. But this is not explicitly stated in the book. More importantly, Voldemort had alternative ways to ensure the boy's death. He could have used the Cruciatus Curse, a test of pain. He could have asked a Death Eater to confirm the pulse. He could have kept the body under surveillance. But instead, he allows Narcissa Malfoy to approach Harry. She leans in, checks his breathing, and whispers a single question. "Is Draco alive?" Harry whispers yes. Narcissa then lies to Voldemort. He is dead. And just like that, the Dark Lord accepts the word of a woman he does not trust, without any verification. This scene alone reveals how dramatically Voldemort's instincts failed him. He had tortured and murdered people for lesser suspicions, yet here he allows Narcissa to walk away with unverified truth. This moment, powerful and moving though it is, clashes with the established behavior of a character known for obsession with certainty. Voldemort, who believed love was a weakness, underestimated the power of Narcissa's maternal bond. But more than that, he underestimated the value of verification. The lie succeeds because Voldemort, for the first time, stops asking questions, and that is precisely what makes it feel like a plot convenience. For 7 books, readers were taught to believe in Voldemort's brilliance. Even in his evil, he was efficient, cold, and calculating. Now, at the climax, he becomes reckless. He accepts a narrative that benefits the hero. He makes the mistake of assuming a sin he had always punished in others. The story needed him to fail, and so the narrative pulls the strings. Another inconsistency lies in Voldemort's use of Nagini. He does not keep her beside him during the forest killing. He isolates her in a magical cage inside the Shrieking Shack, guarded by protective enchantments. But why not have her confirm Harry's death through more brutal means? If Voldemort truly feared death, and he did, to the point of tearing his soul, why take such a chance? Why not test the kill? His entire life was built around ensuring his own immortality, and yet here he does not even try to test whether his greatest enemy was truly vanquished. When Voldemort later faces Harry again in the Great Hall, he is baffled by the boy's survival. "I killed you! Harry Potter is dead!" he shrieks, the mask of control slipping from his face. The reality crashes into him, not as a realization, but as a denial of fate. And in that moment, all the failures converge. His refusal to read, to probe, to suspect. These become his undoing. His own tools, honed over decades, lie unused at his feet. He becomes the villain who forgot how to be a villain. The contrast is sharp when compared to Dumbledore's strategies. Albus never assumed anything. Every plan he made had backups and contingencies. Even in death, he guided events. His conversations with Snape ensured that Harry would know what to do. His understanding of Voldemort's psychology allowed him to set the trap. But had Voldemort simply used legilimency, the conversation between Snape and Harry would never have happened. The Elder Wand's allegiance would never have shifted. The resurrection would never have occurred. Throughout the series, legilimency is shown to be both dangerous and effective. Snape uses it to torment Harry. Dumbledore trains Harry to resist it. It is not a vague or passive skill, it is a force. Voldemort, having mastered it, fails to use it at the one time it could have changed everything. And so the narrative moves forward on the back of this silence. The war ends not with a triumph of cunning, but with a series of lucky breaks. This isn't to say the scene lacks beauty or weight. It is one of the most moving moments in the saga. Harry's self-sacrifice, Narcissa's quiet defiance, the gathering storm of battle. These are unforgettable, but beneath the emotion lies a structural flaw. Voldemort forgets who he is, he forgets to be cautious, he forgets to question, and the story, needing him to fail, allows the forgetfulness. This moment, convenient though it may be, underscores a deeper theme in the series. That evil, in its pride, often destroys itself. Voldemort loses because he assumes victory. He believes so deeply in his own myth that he stops seeking the truth. It's a flaw not of power, but of belief. Yet for readers who remember the cold, calculating lord of previous books, the transformation feels abrupt. The absence of legilimency, or the one spell that could have ended it all, feels not like oversight, but orchestration. And perhaps that's the ultimate lesson. Magic in Rowling's world is only as powerful as the user's intent. Voldemort, driven by control, forgets to doubt. Harry, driven by sacrifice, learns to trust. The battle is not one of wands, but of worldviews. Still, one cannot shake the feeling that the story leaned heavily on convenience, that the master of mental invasion simply chose to look away.